Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Nathalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich, and I'm your host. As we are slowly moving into June, I wanted to take some time to celebrate. On the 21st of June, 2022, I started this podcast. So it is going to be 4 years that I have been podcasting, and as part of that, I have prepared a miniseries. I think I love miniseries because it gives me sort of a topic, a span to think about it. So I want to welcome you to this very special mini-series. So as the podcast is turning 4 years old, I have been sitting with that number, letting it sink in, because when I launched this show in June 2022, I had no idea where it would take me or how many of you it would reach, how many of you would listen and continue to listen. And also, given the research that most podcasts stop after 3 to 5 episodes, I was just discovering how intense this really was and whether I could sustain it. So to mark this anniversary, I have pulled together the 10 most listened to episodes in the podcast history. And I'm doing something that I have never done before. I'm going to go back into each one, reintroducing the guest to you, summarizing what we talked about, and reflecting on why I think that conversation resonated the way it did. I would love to hear what you think, why it might resonate. So we're going to count down from 10 to 1. Let's start. We are at number 8, and I want to say something before I introduce today's episode. This one is not an easy listening. It was not an easy conversation to have, and I do not expect it will be easy to revisit. But it is one of the most important conversations I have had on this podcast, and the fact that it sits in the top 10 tells me that it reached people who needed it. If you are in a vulnerable place today, please take care of yourself as you listen. This episode discusses suicide, intimate partner abuse, and traumatic loss. Episode 160 is my conversation with Shavaun Scott, a psychotherapist, author, and survivor who came to this podcast to share one of the most devastating and complex stories I have encountered in 4 years of doing this work. Shavaun has been a psychotherapist for nearly 35 years, working across some of the most demanding environments in mental health: domestic violence shelters, community clinics, substance abuse programs, forensic settings, and crisis teams. She is also an author, and she has lived with grief and trauma, not only as a professional, but as a person. Losing her mother at 16, her father at 35, and in 2004, her husband of 17 years, who died by suicide. But the circumstances of that death are what makes Shavaun's story particularly complex. Her husband's suicide was a revenge suicide, an act he carried out on the very day she told him she wanted a divorce, after 17 years in an abusive relationship. He staged a gruesome scene in their home, and Shavaun was left to carry not only the weight of the trauma, but a form of grief that is rarely acknowledged. A grief for a relationship that was never truly safe, and grief for a person who caused her harm. She wrote about this experience in her memoir Nightbird, And it is from that place of 20 years of reflection, healing, and professional insight that she joined me for the conversation. Shavaun and I explored what it means to grieve in circumstances where grief is not straightforward, where the person who you lost also hurt you, and where the manner of the death was itself an act of violence, and where the world around you may not know how to respond or what to offer. We also talked about the psychological toll of intimate partner abuse, what it does to a person over years, how it shapes identity, and why leaving is never as simple as it looks from the outside. We talked about what Shavaun calls the moral injuries of suicide, the layers of guilt, confusion, and unanswerable questions that survivors are left with. And we talked about what the road of healing actually looked like for her over 2 decades, what helped, what did not, and what she had come to understand about her own experience that she could not have known at the time. What I found most powerful in this conversation was Shavaun's refusal to simplify what she lived through. She did not present herself as a victim who became a hero. She presented herself as a human being who survived something devastating and spent 20 years learning to live alongside it. And that honesty is rare, and it is exactly what this audience needs. My personal reflection is also based on my personal history with the suicide of my mother. So holding space for Shavaun's story at the same time as holding space for what I have experienced is what really made this conversation so special. So both of us had personal experience, although very different. And we could see what suicide did to us individually. I think that probably the title of the episode is also what drew some of the people listening to it, because it's just so unbelievable to read a revenge suicide and what that means. But I also think that this episode reached so many listeners because it names something that so many people carry in silence: complicated grief. Grief, for example, for someone who hurt you. Grief for a life that was not what it appeared to be. Grief that comes wrapped in trauma and confusion and shame. This is not, or one of the least spoken about forms of loss. There's often no community of mourners, and there may be no or little permission to grieve at all. So Shavaun's willingness to speak about her experience with such clarity and such courage created something rare, a space where that kind of grief could be witnessed. And I believe that it is why people came to this episode, and why many of you stayed and listened to the whole episode. If this story touches something in your own experience, whether you are a survivor of abuse or someone who has lost a person to suicide, or someone living with a grief that doesn't fit the expected shape, I encourage you to go back and listen to the full conversation in episode 160. You can find the link in the show notes. Which one was your favorite episode? I would love to hear from you. In the show notes, there's a button that says send a text. I'll read every one of your messages. Take care. Until next time. Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nathaliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.